Thank you for joining us at Community on Demand. Today's message is presented by Clint Dixon. Clint holds a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in biblical studies, and a master's degree in business administration. Clint is the administrative pastor here at Community. This message was recorded during a live Sunday morning service at Community. Let's join Clint as he begins his message.
So I want to start off this morning, and I want to just tell you a little story about a man named David. David grew up in a small town, and he was raised by a devout Christian family, and he had a deep love for God. As he grew older, he felt a calling to serve others and share the message of faith around the world. And David had a passion for music, and he looked forward to becoming a successful musician. And he spent hours upon hours practicing his guitar and writing heartfelt songs that expressed a love for God. David became increasingly influenced by the allure of fame and recognition as he pursued his musical career. He started to compromise his values in order to gain the approval of the world. He wrote songs that catered to popular trends rather than expressing his true beliefs. And he changed his image to fit the expectations of the music industry, sacrificing his authenticity in the process. Despite his success in the secular music scene, David found himself feeling empty and disconnected from his faith. He realized that he had been seeking validation from the world instead of honoring God with his talents. The more he chased after fame and fortune, the further he drifted from his spiritual roots. And one day, David hit rock bottom. He found himself alone in a hotel room after a grueling tour, surrounded by superficial accolades, by money, by women, by drugs. And in that moment of despair, he turned to God and he prayed for guidance. Through prayer and reflection, David realized that he'd been placing his identity and worth in the fleeting approval of the world rather than seeking God's approval. He repented for his misguided priorities, and he made a commitment to align his life with God's will. And from that day forward, David dedicated his music to glorifying God and sharing his faith with others. He embraced his true calling as a Christian artist, using his talents to inspire and uplift those who listen to his songs. You know, in our own lives, we often seek the approval of the world at the expense of our relationship with God. For some of us, that comes from friends and family. Some of us, that approval comes from work. And in the past 30 years, a whole new phenomenon has started. And that's finding your approval on the internet and social media. Have you ever really kind of thought about that? And thought about how seeking approval in the wrong places not only affects you and your relationship with God, but it can actually affect society. So, everybody's a content creator now, right? You can't even go to the mall anymore without people shooting videos and stuff like that. So let's just take a minute to see what a slice of a content creator's life is like. Now imagine I wanted to start my own content business, right? And I think I have a pretty unique perspective, and we're going to talk about Jesus and turtles. Jesus and turtles, that's what I'm interested in, and I think other people are going to be interested in Jesus and turtles. For a year, I make videos talking about Jesus and turtles. And you know what? I've got 20 followers. I know 15 of them personally. And so I start looking around. I'm like, what are these other people doing that have millions of followers? And I start looking at the trends, right? Okay, well, this one dance is going on right now. This trendy dance is going on right now. So I think I'm going to try that. Normally I'm Jesus and turtles, but we're going to try this dance real quick. And so I get up in front of my camera and I'm like, turtle. And I get 10,000 new followers overnight. And I'm like, wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to do the next trend. I'm going to do the next dance. I'm going to do the next dance. And within 6 months, I've gone from 20 followers to 500,000. I'm no longer doing videos about Jesus and turtles. I may be putting a spoonful of, cinnamon in my mouth and trying to hold it in. I might have a Tide Pod in my mouth, trying to not die. Just so I can get likes. Just so I can get people to engage. So I can have that validation from some people online. So that's on a very personal level, right? Do you think seeking approval affects the way our country is run? You bet it does. You bet it does. So let me ask you this. What have you seen in the last 5 to 10 years, or maybe even a little bit longer? People get on Twitter. And everybody's super brave online. Right? And so you get on there and you put some very outlandish thing. You might not even believe what you're saying. But people start liking it and sharing it. And then all of a sudden you start thinking, hey, I need to get some more of that. And so you keep saying outlandish things. And I'm not picking one side, the left or the right, because honestly, they both do it. Have you noticed how the two parties are more further apart in the past 10 years? And I'm telling you, it's not Donald Trump. Okay? It is, a big part of it is social media, because as people are trying to get approval, they keep saying more and more outlandish things. Do you think news outlets are reporting on that? I tell you, I check my news feed in the morning, and half of them are articles about something that somebody tweeted. Right? Politicians are looking at that. They're pulling that in their statistics to find out what their stance are going to be on particular issues. I am convinced that without social media, we would not have the same issues with gender identity as we do right now. Those are people that are seeking the wrong approval. So how do we get God's approval? And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. So if y'all have your Bible, you can go and open it up. We're going to be in 2 Timothy chapter 2 all morning, so there's not going to be a bunch of flipping around. Second Timothy chapter 2. See, up in this point, when Paul writes this letter, he's actually in prison. And in chapter 1, leading up into chapter 2, he's telling Timothy that he does not need to be ashamed. That Paul himself, in chains in Rome, is not ashamed of preaching the gospel because he is suffering with Christ. He's had people come and quit associating with him because he's a prisoner now. And now there's got to be something wrong because he's a prisoner. There's one, and then he commends one guy that named Onesiphorus that is not ashamed, that comes and visits him, that ministers to him. So he lines out 4 things in 2 Timothy chapter 2 where workmen do not need to be ashamed. The very first thing that he points out is that if you want to be approved by God, you need to avoid needless arguments. So in 2 Timothy 2:14, it says, "Remind them of these things, charging them before the Lord not to strive about words to no profit, to the ruin of the hearers." You know who are Christians? One of Christians' worst enemies? Christians. Right? We tend to squabble over the most silliest stuff. Sometimes churches have split because they couldn't agree on the music they would sing. They couldn't agree on color of carpet. They couldn't agree on whether they want donuts or kolaches. See, we're smart. We squashed it. We get both. We're welcoming. Yes. But Paul's telling us that our words have an effect. And if we involve ourselves in squabbles, then we won't be able to fulfill the desire that God has for our church, that God has for our life. In order to be approved by God, you have to work towards unity. Unity is the answer to avoiding these squabbles. Let me tell you a story about a church. So in a bustling city, there was a small little neighborhood with a small church nestled in it. The congregation was made up of a diverse array of people from various backgrounds and cultures. And despite their differences, they shared a common bond in their love and faith in God. And one summer, the church decided to organize a community outreach to serve their neighborhood. And members came together and they planned and they prepared for the event, and each contributed their unique talents and resources. Some volunteered to cook meals. Others played music, while others organized the games and the activities for the children. And then on the day that the event arrived, the church buzzed and was excited. Everybody was doing exactly what they needed to do. Right in the middle of the event, a large storm cloud comes and begins to pour on the whole event. And as people scattered around, they huddled up underneath small little shelters. They were sharing umbrellas. And as I sat there and they watched the rain, they began to laugh. As they were sitting there and they had to share this and they were going through this together, they started to form bonds. And they turned more from strangers that were working on something together to brothers and sisters in Christ. You know, as the rain poured down, something really remarkable happened. They came together. And the next day, as they were reflecting on the day's events, the congregation realized that unity in the church is not simply about sharing the same beliefs or traditions, but coming together in love and solidarity, embracing diversity, and working together to make a positive impact on the world. In the weeks and the months that followed, the spirit of unity continued to flourish in the church as members worked side by side to serve their community, support one another in times of needs, and celebrate the richness of their diversity. Through their efforts, they became a shining example of God's love and grace, demonstrating that when they come together in unity, there's nothing that we can't achieve. If we want to be approved by God, we can't be the one that is responsible for planting seeds of discord with our brothers and our sisters within the church. God approves unity. If you want to be an approved minister by God, you have to be an avid student of the Bible. 2 Timothy 2:15 says, "Be diligent to present yourself approved to God as a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." This is the Awana verse, right? Awana stands for approved workmen are not ashamed. You know how we cannot be ashamed? It's because the things that we do, the things that we say, should be Bible-based. This book right here is the anchor of our Christian life. It is how we get to know who God is, how much He's loved us, what He's done for us, and it's the only source in the world of objective truth. And it takes time to read it, to study it, to sniff it, to taste it, if that's how you do it. When I was in seminary, I thought maybe if I slept on the Bible, I'd be able to absorb it. It didn't work. I just got a crick in my neck. But the Bible is the foundation of the way of our culture, or it was the foundation of our culture. It is the foundation of our government. You know, in the youth Sunday school class, we're actually doing a whole series. We've been doing a series for months now on biblical citizenship, and it tells us exactly how our country was formed. It was formed on a foundation of faith, Christian faith, and also what our responsibilities are as citizens of that and protecting that truth. So the Bible is where we go to find out what is true and what is not. So I found a little survey that I thought was really interesting. And it was called A Big Mac or the 10 Commandments. It's real simple. Which one could you name first? Can you name all the commandments that are found in Exodus 20? Or can you name the ingredients to a Big Mac burger from McDonald's? Most Americans, when surveyed, did a better job naming the 7 ingredients of a Big Mac. 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun. So 80% knew about the all beef patties, but only 60% of people recognized the command of do not murder. Only 45% knew honor your mother and father. 34% knew remember the Sabbath day. And only 29% recognized do not make yourself an idol. Americans know their hamburgers. We're just a little shaky on the 10 Commandments. I think if we wanted to help people memorize the 10 Commandments, we should cover them in secret sauce. Yeah. So let me tell you one more story about Billy Graham. So this is a completely opposite. We're going from a society that is biblically illiterate to one of the greatest evangelists that have ever walked the face of this earth. Right? We can all agree the guy knew his stuff. Right? That he was sold out for Jesus. So, in an interview, somebody asked him, if you had to live your life over again, what would you do differently? And he answered, there we go. He answered, one of my great regrets is that I have not studied enough. I wish I would have studied more and preached less. People have pressured me into speaking groups when I should have been studying and preparing. That's Billy Graham. How much do you study the Bible? Could you name all 10 Commandments? Can you impart that to someone else? And that's what we do at Awana. We are trying to impart that. We're trying to help them hide that truth in their hearts. They may not even fully understand what they're reading right now. But one day in the future, they're going to be in a situation in their life, and that verse is going to come back. I promise you, it's happened to me at least a dozen times. And it'll make more sense than it ever has. We're preparing for the future. So the Bible is important. If we want to be reproved by God, we also have to avert false teaching. So 2 Timothy 2:16-17 says, "But shun profane and idle babblings, for they will increase to more ungodliness, and their message will spread like cancer." Specifically in this passage, Paul is referring to a couple of people that were teaching incorrect things about the nature of Christ and how bad ideas can spread just as fast as good ones, but maybe even faster. And even us, a devout Christian, can hear a false teaching, and if they're not on guard, if they are not going back and checking it with the Bible and what God says, they can fall victim to that too. Have you all ever heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out? Yeah. In a business setting, right, if you are collecting data for analysis and your data is bad, then the results of your analysis is going to be bad. Right? So if we're allowing false teaching to get into our heads and into our lives, we're not going to get results that God desires. You know, I was at, the first time I went to summer camp was about 13 years ago, give or take. And it was my first time to go. I'd only been saved for about a year. And a kid came up and asked me, had questions about how to be saved. Well, I thought I knew. But as we were talking, I got super nervous. And probably more nervous than him. And it was not because I was talking to an 8-year-old. I'm okay with 8-year-olds. I had this fear in my head. What if I tell him the wrong thing? What if I tell him to believe that Jesus was our prophet, or, something like that? And all of a sudden, he's believing something, thinking that he was saved. But I told him the wrong thing. So false teaching isn't just about receiving false teaching. It's also making sure that you are anchored in the Bible so you yourself are not a false teacher. I just want to go over one false doctrine that I hear a lot from people. And just give me an amen if you've ever heard this, all right? All I have to do is do more good than bad, and I get to go to heaven. I just want to be like, hey! Do you think that God would leave something so important as your salvation up to you? We've been mucking it up since the Garden of Eden. There's no way that he's going to leave that up to us. It was all done by Jesus Christ. He was crucified. He was risen. He's God's Son. He sacrificed for each and every one of us, and all we have to do is believe. And there's nothing that we can add to that. There's no work that can. I just kind of laugh, and I'm like, what do you think is good? We don't know what good is unless the Holy Spirit tells us. Even if we have the best intentions, we don't know what's good to God. So how do we know we're doing good work? And how do we know what that level is? We don't. We have to believe and teach and share good doctrine. And finally, the last thing that Paul says we need to do to be an approved workman from God is that we have to abstain from wickedness. 2 Timothy 2:18 through 20 says, "Nevertheless, the solid foundation of God stands, having this seal, the Lord knows who are his, and let everyone who names the name of Christ depart from iniquity." When I read this verse, and I kind of thinking about it, why would that be important? What if something that I do, a sin that I have in my life, make me not approved? What if nobody knew about it? Our testimony is our uniform that we wear out in the world. As we go, people are watching us. They're watching us how we act. They're watching us the decisions we make. And if we're walking around with sin that we haven't taken care of, that we haven't gone to God and repented of, and we haven't asked forgiveness for, our uniform has spots all over it. And it makes it really hard for people who aren't Christians to want to follow what we're doing. Because at that point, we become a hypocrite. Most of y'all probably don't know, way back when, I used to manage T-Mobile stores. And one of the stores that I managed was actually in the Willowbrook Mall. It was a kiosk in the middle of the mall. And so my employees would always complain to me because they would go and eat in a food court, and people would come up and ask them questions about how to fix their phone as they're sitting there trying to eat, and or ask them questions about their bill. They would sometimes follow them from our kiosk all the way to the food court, and so they would come up and they would complain to me, and they would say, hey, I'm off the clock. I shouldn't have to answer these questions. And my answer to them was, you were wearing your uniform, then you are an ambassador for T-Mobile. Yes, you were expected to answer those questions. I understand that you were off the clock. If you do not want to be asked questions when you're at lunch, change your shirt. Put a jacket on. People are not going to see that logo, and I'm not going to expect you to provide that customer service even when you're eating lunch. But if you're wearing the uniform, you're an ambassador. It seems to me that there are plenty of Christians out there that like wearing the uniform, but they don't want to put the work in. If we want to be approved by God, we have to abstain from wickedness. Now, I'm just going to close this. I know I've told a bunch of stories this morning, but there was just a lot of great stuff. One more story. So a young man once studied violin under a world-renowned master, and eventually the time came for the student's first recital. And following each section, the cheers of the crowd, the performer seemed dissatisfied. Even after the last number, and he'd finished the whole concert, and he got a standing ovation, the performer stood there, and he looked up in the upper balcony at one person. There was an elderly man up there, and as soon as that man gave him a head nod, you could see the relaxation and the elation come over this guy. He accepted the cheers of the crowd. Turns out, the guy up in the balcony was his piano teacher. He wasn't worried about the approval of the crowd. He wasn't a success until he got approval from his master. There are a lot of Christians out there that I think once they stand before the bema seat of Christ, they're going to go to heaven, but they're also going to lose their lives. All that stuff that they thought were doing, maybe stuff they thought was good works and maybe was not, all the stuff they didn't do for Jesus is going to get burned away. You see, that's the time we get to receive our reward, or we get to receive our reward in God's plan. But you know what? Those of us who remain firm, who remain disciplined, who are rooted in the Bible, don't give in to idle chatter, don't or abstain from sin And don't listen to false teaching. Our reward, and this is the one thing that really motivates me, is you get to stand before Jesus, your Creator, your Savior, your Counselor, and He gets to tell you, well done, good and faithful servant. That's what we're looking for.
On behalf of Pastor Dan and the folks at Community, thank you for joining us today at Community on Demand. Feel free to share this link with others, and please know you are always welcome to be our guest during a live service any Sunday morning at our campus in The Woodlands, Texas. For more information, just click on the link www.cbcwoodlands.org. I hope you will again join us at Community on Demand.